Welcome to Urban Toronto Beekeepers Association meeting, November 7, 2023. I'll do that again because my mic was off. So to start with, we'll have Marion with Beekeeping Calendar.
Thank you, Ellen. And it's great to have everyone on board tonight. I'm just going to share the screen and then we'll start. Okay, so where am I here? Show right from the start. So before we start this evening, let's take time to acknowledge this land where we live and work on and raise our bees and be very grateful for it. It has been a site of human activity for thousands of years. Toronto is still the home of many Indigenous people across Turtle Island, the ancestral name of this land. And we are very grateful to be able to live and work on this land. And I encourage you to learn more about the history of the land where your hives are located. This particular UTBA land acknowledgement has been sanctioned by our coordinating committee, and I'm just going to very briefly read it. 1 second here. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on in this traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississauga of the Credit. It's my pleasure this evening to go through the Beekeepers Calendar with you. My name is Marion Whittam. I am the Vice Chair of the UTBA. I have been a member of the UTBA for 8 years. I'm a member of the OBA, and I do present this calendar every month to keep people sort of updated as to what's happening in the bee yard and also other events with respect to beekeeping. I firmly believe that educational references are really necessary, that science is the evidence of which we base our knowledge. And I would highly recommend that you take a look at the following references that pertain to tonight's meeting calendar. The Ontario Beekeepers Association Tech Transfer Program YouTubes on winter bee yard preparation, entrance reducers, oxalic acid treatment, drizzle applications, ventilation, and wrapping. The OMAFRA Best Management Practice for Winter Colonies on Ontario. The best management practices to prepare your hives, again, and an OMAFRA, OBA checklist. And this is a very excellent article in the newest OBA journal, November, December 2023. Should I use oxalic acid to control my mites? It's Melanie Kempers, our OBA, used to be with the OBA Tech Transfer Center and is now with the OBA as the manager of the OBA. So later in my presentation, I'm going to go through a little bit of the summary of Melanie's article to help you understand a little bit more about oxalic acid. The other thing that I do encourage you to do is the University of Guelph, the Honeybee Research Center, has excellent videos, over 800 of them. They're on YouTube, the how-to videos, and great resources for beekeepers. And also hard copy books are always nice to have. I really like Dewey Caron's Honeybee Biology, Story's Guide to Keeping Bees, and our tech transfer manuals are just excellent resources. So winter is really coming and we've got to be prepared. We need to prepare our hives, ensure all the mite treatments are removed, and we'll talk about why that's so important later. Determine if hives need shelter from the wind, move slightly if necessary, and gather materials to provide shelter if required. Install the entrance reducers and or mouse guards if you've not already done so. I think most people may have done that. Install and secure your winter covers to insulate those hives, but remember to ensure there's adequate ventilation to prevent moisture buildup in the inner cover. Leave an upper entrance open for exhaust of moisture. Also think about tilting the hive slightly forward a few degrees to allow any accumulation of moisture to drain out of the bottom. And keep records of your observations when closing each hive, because they're important for the spring when we try and analyze if the colony didn't make it through or whatever other data we have. Some very important things about oxalic acid treatments. It's November. The hives don't have any brood in it now. Remember that oxalic acid is only applied when brood rearing has ceased. And for more information, again, an excellent fact sheet from the OBA on oxalic acid, and also these YouTube videos from the Tech Transfer Center. They are excellent. Now, just a word about oxalic acid. In general, oxalic acid is found in plants and vegetables such as spinach and beetroot and tea and cocoa, and it is an organic compound. But when it's used in this state for helping our bees shed their mites, it becomes a relatively strong acid. It needs to be handled very carefully. It's unlike vinegar or anything else like that with respect to that. Overexposure can cause serious effects to the health effects to the beekeeper. So one of the things to remember is respiratory masks and acid resistant gloves and protective eyewear should be used when mixing and applying any oxalic acid. Remember to read the manufacturer's instructions carefully before applying. And when used properly, there is little effect on the bees, that's the oxalic acid, but it does kill the mites. And of course, if you over apply week after week, that is a problem. It can really kill the bees. There's two ways to apply oxalic acid, and this is all of this information I've sort of summarized from Melanie Kemper's article. The trickle method, 3.5% oxalic acid concentration in sugar solution. For example, you take 35 grams, you actually weigh the oxalic dehydrate, and you put in 1 liter of warm sugar syrup, warm water, sugar syrup. And if you're doing sugar syrup, it's 1 kilogram of sugar per 1 liter of water. Mix it well, and this amount should, as Melanie said, treat about 20 colonies. You use a syringe to trickle it between each of the frames that contain the bees. And for larger ones, you crack open the space between the 2 boxes and trickle. And always use freshly mixed oxalic solution. And this method generally takes 1 to 2 minutes per hive. The vaporization method is the other method. It's different vaporizers are available. Instructions are specific to these vaporizers. Please make sure you read the instructions very carefully before your vaporizer is used and follow them when performing the vaporization. Wear the personal protective equipment, eyes protection, skin protection, protective clothing against these vaporizing oxalic crystals. And this method takes about 4 minutes a hive. And there's a material safety data sheet or a data sheet on the OBA website about oxalic acid safety. Oxalic acid should be stored. It should be stored in a dry area at room temperature to prevent moisture from absorbing, which will make it powder solidify. It in all forms, oxalic acid is odorless. And do not store any leftover oxalic acid mixed solution, because what happens is it starts to decompose after a while. Here's a very interesting study that was done by the Ontario Beekeepers Association. Industry update regarding Apivar. Possible resistance identified in Ontario. The Tech Transfer Center received a small amount of funding in September to look at some apiaries in the Guelph area. And the goal was really to identify if there was resistance to amatrase, an active ingredient in Apivar, and it's developing in Ontario. And the results are very, very preliminary. And you've got to remember that it is a small sample that was taken, a small amount of colonies. However, the results may be important for you to consider in your fall 223 and your spring mite management of 224. So they selected some colonies for this sample. They were screened with the alcohol wash, and only those colonies with mites of 3 per 100 bees or greater were tested for resistance. Remember, that is the threshold for bees in the fall. And as well, the hives could not have had any of this particular treatment with the aericide that was being tested, which is amitrase, the active ingredient of Apivar. And the results indicate that mites can develop resistance because of repeated and or over or under exposure to chemical treatment. And you may ask, how did they do this? So they did a petit test as one of the ways to test for varroa mite. A sample of the mites infected with bees are placed in a glass jar and exposed to small pieces of chemical strip for 24 hours. When the test is complete, the effectiveness of the chemical strip is estimated by comparing the number of mites that fell during the 24-hour period, mites killed by the strip, to the total number of mites in the test jar. And mites that are killed by the strip, plus the mites that remain on the bees and were not killed. So that is a preliminary possibility that there is some resistance coming to this Apivar, the active ingredients of amitrase. So what can you do to try to prevent this mite resistance? Follow the manufacturer product instructions, ensure to use the correct dose and treatment, period. Improper application of miticides can lead to resistance. Remove those synthetic chemical strips at the end of treatment period. Leaving them on over the winter will expose mites to low doses. They survive and they can develop resistance. Only use chemicals when needed as indicated, and perform frequent mite monitoring techniques, rotating between chemical treatments, organic treatments, synthetic treatments, whatever. But avoid using the same chemical treatments back to back, because again, you can get resistance happening. And add organic and synthetic treatments with different modes of action in your rotation, and learn more about the different treatment options by checking the Tech Transfer Center videos. And there they are, excellent videos. Now, the Ontario Varroa Mite Monitoring Campaign is still in full swing in partnership with the Ontario Animal Health Network. And they, again, are really looking to see what is happening with the mite population, our Varroa mite population in their bees. So they ask people to try to submit their data to them that they have over the summer, that hopefully you're recording your mite levels through the year. And then fill in a survey for the Animal Health Network. At the end of the campaign, they're going to look, you can visit the website and you're going to use this information. They'll use the information to make more decisions about how to treat varroa mites. So again, they're working with that particular project too. Now, you may think that, you know, your bee season is winding down, but there's a lot happening for beekeepers today. The Royal Winter Fair is celebrating 101 years from November 3rd to the 12th, and see the Royal Agricultural Winter Fair website for all scheduled events. It's a fantastic event. One of the really exciting things that's happening this year is the OBA Honey Showcase at the Royal Winter Fair. It's a new and really exciting event. I encourage you to come down to see the wonderful showcase, meet the OBA reps, and network with our fellow beekeepers. In fact, tonight there are 6 of our UTBA members down there broadcasting from this OBA showcase. So this is a first for us, and we're really proud that they're doing that. Michelle Wolfson's also really promoting the fair, has posted great pictures of the event on the UTBA website. Jars of honey are in that showcase displayed at the booth at the Royal Winter Fair this year. And all beekeepers who submit their honey for the showcase and successfully fill out that online form that was there, their information is displayed on an adjacent monitor, which is rotating slideshow, so the public can meet the beekeepers and behind the honey. And the OBA, Michelle Wolfson, as an OBA director, are also posting beekeeping profiles for the honey showcase on Facebook to promote their apiaries and to give opportunity for people to become more familiar with beekeepers who provide honey for this event. The next exciting thing that's happening is the Ontario Beekeepers Association annual 2-day general meeting. November 23rd and 24th in Peterborough. Registration is now open, and you can consult the OBA website for conference information, for the fees, for the agenda, for the guest speakers. The list of guest speakers will include the Tech Transfer Center, OMAFRA, the University of Guelph, and the Honeybee Research Center. The trade show this year, I'm told, will be packed full of vendors and information. There will not be a dinner this year, like last year, they didn't have one either. Instead, there will be a fun social night on Thursday evening with snacks and networking, and this event is open to all OPA members attending the meeting. There will also be a honey exchange, and you can bring your unique, fun, or interesting honey in 500 ml jars for the honey exchange. And this is a great way for you to taste various flavors of honey from across the province. And I've had an opportunity to do that in the past, and it's just a great thing to be able to taste various types of floral honeys. The OMAFRA Beekeepers Certificate of Registration, the Bees Act is a legislation that regulates beekeeping in Ontario. And the main purpose of this act is to protect the health of the honeybees, and includes the requirement for the beekeeper or anyone possessing beekeeping equipment to obtain a certificate of registration from OMAFRA. And so a valid registration is required for all beekeepers, and proof of registration is needed to apply for permits or funding programs, to receive honeybee inspection services from OMAFRA, and to obtain the OBA liability insurance. The registration is free. Beekeepers whose certificate of registration is expiring this year are required to submit a registration renewal, and new keepers are encouraged to apply for the certificate. See the OMAFRA website for complete details as to how to obtain the certificate. The other thing for those that have their certificates, there's changes coming to the Ask OMAFRA profile. They are really streamlining it. They're making it like our My Ontario standard login system. For those of you that are registered, you have or may have or already have received instructions as to how to log on to it. And if there's any questions, you can contact the Agricultural Contact Center or email OMAFRA. The Ontario Beekeepers Association membership enrollment will be coming up shortly. For those that are not members, it's a great thing to do. It saves you money on workshops, meeting, conferences, and subscriptions to the OBA Journal and the Honey Council Journal, which I always take a look at both of them. They're both excellent resources. It protects you and your assets by offering you affordable bee and honey related group liability insurance. Note, to be eligible, you have to be registered with OMAFRA for your hives. And currently, I'm sure after this OBA general meeting, as it happened last year, that's when they started to send the renewals out to the current membership. And there will be a link connecting directly to the personal profile. And this link will allow you to choose other benefits along with your membership. A very interesting, another project that's happening very soon, in a couple of weeks. You are invited to attend an open house of the Nucleus Colony Overwintering Project. It's a partnership between the University of Guelph and Jerry Girard. Funding provided by OMAFRA and supported by the Central Ontario Beekeepers Association and Dancing Bees. It's taking place November 18th. It's a Saturday. Sorry, this is a typo here, but it is the 18th. From 1 to 3 at the Kawartha Lakes Honey. And there's the address. It's a drop-by event for maximum opportunity for direct discussion, and refreshments will be served. You will have the opportunity to view an overwintering facility, discuss the success and challenges of the facility with Jerry and the researchers involved, and learn about the plans to use the facility as a queen rearing facility in the future. And last but not least, before I end, as we speak tonight, there is one of these free biosecurity webinars going on this week and next week. But for those that are attending this meeting tonight, you won't be at that one too. But there is another one that they've told me it's Thursday the 11th and Thursday the 18th of January from 10 to 12 about the benefits of having biosecurity program, the key practices to enhance biosecurity for your bees, have the opportunity to learn the knowledge from the staff, And you have to participate in both sessions, and you need to have a laptop or desktop computer to participate. No smartphones. It will not work on that. And that's basically the end of my presentation. I encourage you to be prepared for winter and to stay well. And I'm going to send it back to Alain.
Thank you very much, Marion. Heather, you can start sharing. We'll have now Heather. She'll be talking about setting up and managing the Layens hives in the 2023 season.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Can people hear me online or anywhere?
Yes, that's good.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about our experiences a couple years ago, briefly, even though I know I spoke to you guys earlier this year, actually in March or so about that. But I'm just going to start out with that, and then I'm going to tell you what we did this year. Once I find my... There we go. Okay. Okay. All right. So, yeah. First of all, I guess to start out with, my name is Heather Broccard-Bell. I am the honeybee health researcher for NOD Apiary Products. We make Formic Pro and the Bee Cozy. And I did speak to the group earlier in March, as I said, so probably some of you may remember who I am. Okay, so just to start out with, what is a Layens hive? So Layens hives are these horizontal hives. We're mainly used to the vertically modular Langstroth variety that was patented in about 1852 by Reverend Langstroth. But sometime a little bit later, a French apiculturist named Georges de Léon decided that he wanted to develop a style of hive based on that, the movable frame design that Langstroth had patented. But he wanted to develop something that would require less intervention. So he actually wanted to develop a style of hive that would be suitable for remote apiaries where people didn't have to be there managing. And of course, this was in the days before varroa, so that was a different time. But the basic horizontal hive design is very, very old. And in fact, the earliest depictions of beekeeping that we have are in a horizontal type design hive. You can see here, there is, this is from an Egyptian tomb. We've got these cylinders and then bees here. And this is actually on the left-hand side of that is what the modern day equivalent of this is. So these are clay cylinders and the bees freely build comb inside of those. Okay, so that's the basic horizontal type design, but Georges de Léon made it so that we had removable and movable frames within that type of structure in a box rather than a cylinder. And if you want to read the full details of all of that, it's in this this book published in about 1870, I believe, on the design and the inspiration for it. Also, if anybody has any questions as I go along, like, please feel free to stop me and ask. All right. So as I spoke to you earlier in March, a couple of years ago, we had experimented a little bit with two 20-frame Layens. Actually, one was a 19-frame Layens and one was a 20-frame Layens. The reason that NOD is interested in investigating this style of hive is because as we expand our business into the global marketplace, we come across these different types of hives that we actually don't know how to use our product in. So people will ask us, how do we use Formic Pro in a whatever type of hive? And in Europe, there are many, many, many types of hives. And the Layens hive, the 12-frame variety in particular, is quite popular in some regions, mainly Spain and Portugal. There are actually millions of Layens hives there. It's one of the predominant hive styles in those countries. So we decided that we better figure out how to apply our product in these different styles of hives. We have the unique challenge of our product being a vapor as opposed to a contact chemical, which is what most other varroicides are. So the hive shape and size actually can make a difference to how that product works. So we needed to know how to do it. So we started in 2021 by getting these 2 20-frame layens. We just thought that we would try to learn how to run these hive styles. So we did. Successfully ran them for the whole season. They were living up until the end of the season. Then things happened and the one hive actually died before winter and then the other one died over winter. They both started off as swarms, so they were fairly small to begin with. But we did successfully apply Formic Pro. And we did this based on, we had actually run 2 pilot studies in Spain previously, where the people had actually hung strips of Formic Pro, 2 strips of Formic Pro at the end of the last occupied frame within the colonies. And they'd had success doing that. They'd actually stapled the strips onto the face of the frames. We used this little unbent paperclip design, which worked well for us, but it's not particularly convenient. So we had to think about what we could do about that. And we did come up with something a little bit better. But here, this little graph here shows the 2 hives that we treated. Of course, it's not a real scientific sample. So before treatment is the light yellow bar, and then after treatment is the dark orange bar. So you can see a reduction in mites, and this is in the fall when it's actually hard to see a reduction in mites when you treat. Especially for this house colony, it was down. I think we found 1 mite in the colony after treatment. The Frankfurt colony started out quite high, like more than 15% mite count. This is from an alcohol wash. And we got it down below 10. Again, in the fall, it's hard to achieve that sort of thing with the shrinking of the size of the colony going on at the same time. So that was 2021. Then we were working on expanding over 2022. We also NOD moved to a new manufacturing facility, so that occupied quite a bit of everyone's time. So I didn't do anything with it last year, but then this spring, I was fortunate enough to be able to hire a helper. And by helper, I mean someone who does the bulk of the beekeeping for me. So this is Hannah, my now tame beekeeper that works with me. And so we decided that we were going to run a full-scale Layens trial. And in fact, we're going to run it over 2 years. So we're going to continue this next year as well. So we started off by having Jay at Iron Horse Honey custom build us 36 12-frame Layens hives. And we chose 12 frames rather than the 20 or 19 that we'd used before, because this is the standard in the countries that we're interested in working with. It also turns out that a 12-frame Layens is not that much different in terms of volume from a Langstroth colony, a double Langstroth colony. But the main difference here between a Layens and a Langstroth is that the frames fit tightly together, which again, because our product is a vapor, could really affect how that is working. But applying our product was only one of the things that we wanted to know. We also just wanted to know how to run these things and how successful they are in our particular climate, since not that many people use Layens here. So we actually went to horizontalhive.com. Michelle was telling me earlier that she's read Dr. Leo's book. So Dr. Leo has this whole company set up out of Missoula, I think it is. Missouri. And he runs this website. That's actually where we had purchased the first 2 kits that we bought. But he also provides free plans for you to design your own and build your own. So we built 12-frame Layens based on his design. We also custom fit these with drawers underneath. So we have a screen bottom board. So there's actually a screen bottom in this. And anyone that's ever done any mite testing using sticky boards, you know that you need to have this sort of thing. And for research, we really need to have that sort of capacity. So we had Jay rather, build us these 36 boxes, and he had them finished by about February. So then it came time to put them in the yard. I didn't provide you with pictures of that, but we just basically took them out. We actually established 2 different yards. So it's 18 colonies per yard. and they're in two fairly different locations. They're separated by about 50 kilometers. And then how are we going to populate them? Well, because NOD was going through expansion, I only overwintered around 30 colonies last year. We just didn't have the base to actually start our own colonies. So we ended up ordering packages. So we got packages from Italy. These were Buckfast packages for no particular reason, just that they were available. I wasn't particularly targeting Buckfast, and we got them from Dancing Bees. So we whipped over to Dancing Bee, picked up our packages in the trailer, as you can see here. And that was mid-April. Got them home and then installed them overnight, which is something that commercial beekeepers commonly do because the bees are a little bit calmer, although crawlier and stingier in the middle of the night. Yeah, so we wore these, we wore the red headlamps and used a sugar spray to spray the bees, first of all, so that they weren't moving around a lot, and also to spray the frames. So I should mention at this point that all of the frames that these were going to be on are completely undrawn, brand new plastic foundation, which is also something a little bit unusual because most people that run Layens hives don't use foundation. It's mostly foundationless. However, the powers that be that direct my life really are commercial beekeeping influences, and so wanted to be able to put these in an extractor. So wanted to ensure, even though you can put foundationless in an extractor, my bosses were thinking more of the commercial grade extractor where you don't have the speed control that you would with a hand extractor. So these all have undrawn plastic foundation. And then on top of that, to mitigate the possibility of introducing foreign substances or disease from wax, these are all unwaxed plastic foundation. So we gave our bees the worst possible start to life. It's mid-April. The temperatures were okay, actually, this year. They weren't bad. But needless to say, we fed the crap out of these guys immediately. So we had, you can kind of see, so the packages, I don't know, does anybody know about packages, or does everyone know about packages? What packages are, or does anyone want me to explain those?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so these packages come, as I said, from Italy. They come in these boxes. You can see my cursor here. These are 3-pound packages. These particular ones came with fondant. In North America, a lot of packages come with syrup, but fondant actually travels better. So these had fondant as a food supply, and essentially they have 3 pounds of bees, and then you've got a caged queen in there. So you pull out, here you can see a ball of bees. That's actually the caged queen, which is on a string. So you pull her out, and these packages actually come apart, kind of pull them apart like a clamshell, dump the bees into the hive, and then you suspend the queen in there in her cage, and she's got a candy plug in there. So, and then you come back and check on it in a few days and see if she's been released properly. So it's kind of like installing a new queen, but then with a bunch of bees too, but they don't have any existing foundation. And so hopefully that's mitigating to some extent the spread of disease along with them. Okay, so then my lovely Hannah spent much of her time during April filling these little quail feeders every 3 days or actually it was more than that. It was more like every day to begin with. These are 1 quart quail feeders. So what we did was we took out the first 3 frames because at that point they hadn't built any comb or anything anyway. And it turned out that they didn't actually build a lot of burr comb around that, even though we left the feeders in there for probably about a month at the beginning. So Hannah was out there every day filling these feeders with sugar solution, feeding these bees up. And then of course, by around the 1st or 2nd week of May, forage is really coming on, and then they're not really paying attention to it anyway. And at the same time, we also left all the fondant that they arrived with in there just in case they wanted to keep working on that. And as we all know, hives can be wildly variable. So some hives would take down all the sugar solution and eat all the fondant, where other ones would barely do anything with it. So here was something interesting that we totally weren't anticipating, given how crappy of a start our bees had to life. By the beginning of June, it became apparent that they'd actually done really well. Really, really, really well. And by mid-June, we were starting to see swarming. Like they had filled out these boxes. They'd drawn this comb. I should mention that this unwaxed brand new foundation, for reasons that escape me, was installed using fishing lines. So it was not really securely attached inside of the frames. So the bees had lots of opportunity. I think I have some pictures of it, to build lots of creative structures like this. And Hannah spent a good deal of the summer diligently scraping out this cross comb and trying to fix it and trying to realign all these frames.
So I have two questions at this point.
Yes.
John is saying he might have missed the location of the apiaries.
Yes, good point. I'm sorry. Yes, our manufacturing facility is based out of Trenton. So one of our apiaries is at Trenton at our manufacturing site. And then the other one is about 50 kilometers away by my house, which is just north of Belleville. So in the Belleville-Trenton region. So that's about halfway between Toronto and Ottawa, for those that need to know that.
And then in terms of the plastic foundation, was it custom built, as in cut from the Langstroth?
Yes,
so-
it was.
okay.
Yes, it was Langstroth foundation, and then Jay cut it down to make it fit in these frames. So the frames are shorter because he's got the foundation put in the opposite, or the like 90 degrees to what it would be in a Langstroth. But that's shorter than the full length of a Langstroth frame. So he had to cut it down a bit.
And during the start, did you offer them any frames that were foundation less?
We didn't offer them any foundation less frames. However, we did scavenge the 39 frames from the other two colonies that we'd had the 2 years before. So we actually did start with like we tried to start with one drawn frame in every box.
And in terms of the swarming, was there like, did you make notes of how strong they were when they started swarming? Did you keep records
Of how strong the colony was when it?
Yeah, like say you said mid-April. And
Yeah.
how fast they progressed?
No, not really detailed notes, unfortunately, on that. No.
Did you feed for a long time when you started them?
We fed until they stopped taking the feed. Is what it was. And that was mainly when the forage started coming on. Yeah. So yeah, because we were anticipating that they were going to struggle through the whole year, we wanted to do as much as we possibly could for them, but it turned out that that maybe wasn't as necessary. Yeah, so that was basically the swarm management, which was we tried to prevent them from swarming as much as we could. We started harvesting honey when we could. That was a little bit complicated too, because you can only extract using an extractor if you have access to Tom's extractor, which is what is it? It's a 16 frame radial.
It's a combination. It's actually a 12 frame medium.
That's right, a
But
12
I
frame
have these
medium.
Inserts that I put in.
Yeah.
It's deep Layens Hive.
Yes, yeah. So not every extractor will take these, and
It's European.
it's a European extractor. So we were able to mitigate some of the swarming that way. But then we were actually able to capture a lot of the swarms that swarmed, and it worked out fairly well because we did have some non-survivors and some ones that turned drone layer. So we actually ended up repopulating some of our own colonies with the swarms. So I'll just give you a preview. Now it is the end of the season, and we started with 36 colonies. I think we're going into winter with 34. So we did okay.
I did more than okay. Like you said, yeah.
Yeah, we were pleased with the outcome. Okay, so this wonky comb. So actually, sometime during the summer, we decided that what we would gradually do over time is replace these frames that were strung with fishing line and actually wire them properly. So, and then another thing that we did was we added reinforces. I wanted to bring a frame and then I couldn't find them this morning. Apologies, and I don't have a picture, but we put a reinforcing bar along each side at the top and at the bottom. And then we ran actual wire, like picture wire, this direction rather than the fishing line is this way. And then all the foundation was sort of slipping and going sideways. So we're gradually building these frames sort of properly and then replacing them as we can. So as we extract them, or now that the clusters have all shrunk, we'll probably go through and do some more. Yeah, so this is the honey. This is Tom's nice extractor that he was kind enough to lend us that can accommodate that honey. This is our offices. This is a really nice frame of honey. Earlier in the year, we got excited because we don't have a lot of experience with layens, thinking that we might need to somehow segregate the honey from the non-honey frames intentionally. So we went through and we actually built a bunch of sort of queen excluders. We'll call them queen discouragers because they're not really complete queen excluders. They're the same size and shape as a layens frame. And what we did was we cut down plastic queen excluder and we just made it like a little rectangular window and put it on there, put it in. And the reason I say that they're queen discouragers is because our bottoms, as I mentioned before, are screen. So the queens could really get under there, although that didn't happen, but I think that they could if they really were motivated to do so. At the end of the day, we took them all out because they were way more annoying to deal with than just letting them segregate their own honey. And it turned out that they actually did a decent job of that anyway. So I don't have a picture of that because it didn't really work out and I wouldn't recommend it, at least based on my experience. So then it came to our experimental phase and also our company goal, which was treatment with Formic Pro. So we decided to try something new this time. So rather than just do the one treatment placement at the end of the box, we also tried putting the treatment right in the middle of the brood zone. Now, I anticipated that this would just result in a whole bunch of dead brood, but it didn't. So that was really interesting to me. And then the other thing is I told you that we had devised sort of a better way to suspend these strips in here. We came up with this idea of using, you know, those bags you buy onions in at the grocery store or apples or whatever. So we ordered a bunch of that, like sort of in a long tube, and made these bags in which we placed the Formic Pro strips and then used tacks to suspend them and then push the frames back together once they were in there. As bees are wont to do, there was a decent amount of bearding. I'm sure that anyone that's used Formic Pro before has seen that. That was totally normal. And in fact, some of these colonies would just look like this for much of the summer anyway. And I attribute that to their strength. Yes.
Did you create any openings aside the entrances for this application?
No, but so we didn't open up anything down below because there were those two slots that were in the design. So that was just the way that it was. The top, though, you can't really see it. I don't think that I have any pictures of it. Those tops are ventilated. They actually have little like 4 or 5 holes, yeah, with screen on the inside. Now, to be fair, when the frames are all pushed together, I'm not sure how much difference that makes because there's not a lot of airflow there anyway. But because we always had these wonky configurations, like here's our queen discourager right there, you can see it. When we put that in, we actually only had 11 frames in the colony, so there was a little bit of space. So I don't feel like that would have made a huge amount of difference, the amount of space that we had there, but you never know, and we'll do something different when we redo this in the spring. So we put we had 3 groups. So we ended up, by the time we sorted through and got rid of a couple colonies that were superseding at the time or abnormal in some other way, we ended up with 30 colonies in the study. So there were 3 groups of 10, and there was an untreated control group, and then the group with the strips hanging in the brood zone right in the middle. We just found the middle of the brood zone and hung it there wherever that was. And then the one hanging at the end of the colony. And this was at the beginning of September was when we actually did this treatment. So they were untreated up until then. And because they'd arrived as packages, that they had a very low varroa mite load anyway. I don't have my alcohol wash numbers on here because we're still working through them, and also the sticky boards and a bunch of other stuff were right in the middle. We ran 6 studies simultaneously this summer, so we have a lot of data to go through. But I will say that the stick or the alcohol wash numbers were always hovering around like 3 or 4%. So it was like still fairly low. But we did do an operculated brood biopsy, which I do have the data for. So an operculated brood biopsy is when you go through, you pull out a brood frame and you randomly as you can, open up 100 cells and you see what's going on in there. You can check to see if the mites are alive or dead, if the bees are alive or dead, what stage the bees are at, and how many mites are in there, and what they are they males, are they females, whatever. So we have all that quantified. And it was fairly striking. So in the untreated controls, all of the mites that we came across were alive under the cap, which is, having done 1 million of these this summer, I can say that's fairly standard if you haven't treated anything. The ones that had the Formic Pro at the end of the hive, and we always noted how far away the frame that we sampled was from where the Formic Pro strips were. It was about 4 to 6 frames away usually. We had about 40% mortality below the cap in those. When the Formic Pro was in the brood zone though, which was always 1 frame away from wherever we sampled, we had a 93% mortality, and that was across, it didn't matter if they were foundresses, and in fact, actually almost all of I think I found 1 live foundress in, yes.
What was the size of the cluster or the brood?
The brood zone at this point?
Yeah, was it like 3, 4 frames?
Yeah, in most of
Every-
these colonies, it would have been like 4 or 5 frames,
Okay,
actually. It was
okay.
they were fairly extensive at this point. So
And when you put the strip in the nest, was it like in the middle?
in
or
the very middle,
okay,
yeah,
cool.
as middle as we could possibly make it in the brood zone. So we have it noted for every single colony where exactly that was. Yeah, and as I said, we really didn't see a lot of brood deaths. So we had dead bee traps set out front. So these are just these are old shallow boxes with some cloth and then some hardware cloth to stop the wasps from carting off anything that comes out there. And you can go through and you can count to see how many dead bees result. And then if they're throwing out brood, you can also see that there. Did not see any brood being tossed out. It's not that unusual, but it was unusual, like I said, because we had these strips right against brood. And here is actually one of the frames that was right where the strips were. And you can see a little bit of the outline of the strip where it was hanging, where it kind of mushed the brood and they couldn't get at the brood. But I didn't, like I said, I did not see evidence. To be fair, this was when we actually did the first assay. So this is 21 days after treatment, but right after treatment, we also just did not see a lot of dead brood. So could have been the time of year. Maybe the colonies were just strong enough to deal with it. It's hard to say.
I think it's the size of the plate, possibly.
It could also be that. I mean, there's a lot of different factors that we could test.
So this first treatment was September, right?
Yes. Yeah. So it was, I think it was around the 7th of September is when this treatment was. Yeah. Yeah. And you can see here too, you can see our drawers that the drawers actually slide in from this side. These hives are sort of facing away from each other on the stands because their stands were not wide enough to let them be sitting side to side. And the other thing that these stands do is we've specially designed them so that one of those Hivetronics scales can go underneath of them and we can weigh them. So, yeah. Okay, and that is pretty much what I have to share with you guys. Oh, and the other thing that we've done is we've sampled honey to look at residues as well. That's something else we need to quantify. So we've got a bunch of data that needs to be analyzed, but it's looking good. Questions?
Okay, so first question is, what was the mite infestation before treatment, and then what was it after, and how long after did you do the measurements?
Okay, so the mite infestation based on alcohol washes, which I don't have the data up here, was about 4 or 5% across the board. So before we treated, we did an assessment, a full colony assessment, where we did Liebfeld brood areas and things like that too. So we actually went through and we quantified exactly what was in there in terms of bees, how much they weighed, what the mite infestations were and everything, and made sure that all the groups were completely balanced. So you want to, of course, start out your experiment that way. It was about 4 or 5% is what the mite count was before. And I haven't finished quantifying what the after alcohol washes were, but we did the alcohol wash. The follow-up alcohol wash was 21 days post-treatment.
From the samples you did you notice a difference between the colonies that had swarmed and the other ones?
So that's another thing that we're working on too, because we had all of our queens marked, and anything that swarmed, of course, is going to have an unmarked queen, or we remarked them. So we've tracked all that, and that TBD. But I do suspect, so just going through behaviorally, anytime we would come across a colony, and I didn't, after a while, so many of them had swarmed or changed identities that I didn't know which one was which. And we'd go through and we'd be doing our mite washes, and we always do them where we shake a frame into a bucket. And I got really good at guessing which ones were still the original Italian buckfast versus the ones that had swarmed, because the ones that had swarmed were always much more active in the bucket after I'd shaken them. The buckfast just sort of sat there. And it became a game for us actually to see if we could guess, but we were actually pretty good at it. So I would suspect that there will be a difference. But yeah, we're working on that yet.
When could we get the final results?
It'll be in the next month or so. Yeah, depending on who's pushing for what data and when they want it by.
Question for you, Heather. Oh, sorry, folks. Yeah, question for Heather. I'm intrigued by I mean, that's a huge difference between the hanging a strip at the end of the hive to center of the brood nest, from 40 to 93%. So it leads me back to the question, using Langstroth type equipment, we have always advised people, particularly running double brood boxes, to put those strips between the two boxes. Many of our commercial beekeepers, just at a time out of not wanting to crack those boxes, want to put it on top. I don't know. Do we have historical data on the difference between putting the strips on top of a double brood box? Because I'd love to have that number to say, this is why you need to put it between the two boxes. Or maybe that's another research project for you.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We may indeed have historical data. I'll look into it. I feel like we possibly don't. But yeah, it's an interesting question. There is a reason why we recommend that. So.
Did you do any treatments at the end of the season after this formic?
Yes. I actually meant to say that. So to do a proper efficacy study, you have to do a cleanup treatment afterwards. So we actually did 3 rounds of oxalic vapor after this. So 1 month after our treatment, we did 3 rounds separated a week apart, which is the European standard for doing critical treatments with oxalic. Yeah.
And how were you able to apply the oxalic acid? Was it through InstaVap or something like the little hole? So in other words, you couldn't get a traditional Haley Heiser or Varox in.
Probably not. I'm guessing not. No, because the holes they're quite small. Yeah, it's like 1/2 inch, I think. Yeah, we bought an InstaVap, which is amazing. We love it.
Yeah, I use the InstaVap. Did you close one side of? I saw that there's 2 entrances. Did you close them?
Yeah. To be fair, I wasn't actually there when the treatments got applied. Hannah did it, but I think she ended up closing so even the ventilation holes on the top, she closed those as well.
And then that's for 10 minutes.
Yes. Yeah.
And did you count before the oxalic and then after, so you'll have
so we have sticky board data that was running all the way from the very beginning, so before we did any treatment, and then the sticky boards were in for like 2 months. So yeah, we have a ton of data. Yeah, and I know at least post Formic Pro, people are already complaining that there are too many mites in the board. So I know we got a decent drop there at least.
And did you count and then clean up the drop during, like, say, after a week? And so did you count like what the difference was, like 1 week after applying, 2 weeks, and so on?
Yeah, we swapped sticky boards every 3 days. Yeah, because that's the international standard. Yeah.
So do you recommend these hives?
I think it depends on your purposes. If you're a commercial beekeeper and you're looking to do commercial scale honey production, no. But if you want to run a couple colonies, they're pretty cool. But I think, and I wanted to speak to the swarminess a little bit. So even though we gave them the worst possible start, they seem to build up quickly. I think that has to do with the fact that Ontario is a fairly resource heavy area. It's very lush in the summertime. The regions where these are commonly kept, places like Spain, it's very dearthy. There's not that much forage in the summertime. They go through long periods of drought. I think in regions like that, they don't have the swarmy problem because it sort of mitigates itself. So even though these are intended to be low management hives, I think in the region of Ontario, at least if you run a 12-frame, I think it's different if you run the 20-frame. These are maybe not low management hives in Southern Ontario.
Could you stack them up and have like two?
Sheila,
can you stack them? I know some people in some regions do, but it's hard because of the frames fitting tightly together to really achieve that.
so this summer I ran 2 of these. They were 21 frames, and I divided them in 3 slots. So I actually had 6 in total. And it's really, really way less maintenance on them. And then what's nice is that you can just, I did foundation less, and you can just cut the foundation and then slice it, and that's it. So it is easier to maintain, but it's a bit different when you have to treat. So that's what we'll have to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Designed the hives. He encouraged swarming as part of the natural brood break, and he advocates that you should sit in a little hut in June with a little cup of lemonade and watch and sit there all day long and wait for your hive to swarm and then run out and catch it. Just want to let you know that is how he advocates for swarming. He doesn't.
So we were doing it right.
Right. Yeah. So anyways, but that's part of it.
Yeah, for biosecurity reasons, I would say maybe not, but yes, no, I think if you have the time, and this is not a business for you, I think that having these hives, it's delightful. Like I would definitely encourage it. And I will also say a plug for NOD that at the end of this study, we are going to be selling all of these hives. So if anybody is thinking about purchasing study ready, sticky board ready hive, we're going to have a few for sale, probably spring 2025.
And if you want some spring 2024, I'll have some nooks for sale for Layens next spring.
Yeah.
Are these hives easier for people with accessibility issues?
Oh, yes, that's a good point. Yes, they are. So that's another reason to go to horizontal hives like this, because you don't have to be lifting the boxes up. And there's lots of really neat, like these are not on stands that are really good for accessibility, but you can build some really cool stands where they're just right at the right height if you're in a chair or something like that. Or if you don't want to bend over. Yeah, these can be a really nice design for people with accessibility, or if you just don't want to lift a bunch of heavy boxes. Yes, that is a good point. A full frame of honey is really heavy, but I think these are designed so that you can take your wagon out and you can just wheel it beside the hive. You take out your full frame and then you put in an empty and then carry on with your day. Yeah.
In terms of like preparing for the winter, did you have to feed them? Did you have any specific criteria on how many frames of honey / syrup they would need?
Yeah. Well, we didn't have any specific targets. We're kind of going based on what a double Langstroth should weigh. And because we didn't harvest a bunch of honey from them, we left most of it for them. we're not that concerned. We did feed them a little bit in the fall. And NOD open feeds. So that's what we were doing in the fall with them, even though we started them off in hive feeding in the spring. And that was just to make sure that they were getting what they needed to get.
Are all of them gonna go into winter with 12 frames?
Yes. Yeah. So we did take out that queen discourager and we have replaced it with the 12 frames. And in terms of actual winterizing, I think what we may end up doing is just cutting a foam board and putting a foam board on top of them.
So you think the top insulation is gonna be the only insulation?
Most likely, yeah. The walls on these, I believe, are thicker than normal Langstroth walls. So I think that they'll be okay in terms
It's a 1.5 inch, right?
Yeah.
Did you speak about your
I haven't spoken. I mean, I think I told this group that I was running it. You guys want to know about bee cozies?
Of course.
Learn some stuff there.
I can show a graph. Yeah,
Sure.
sure. Okay. Let me see if I can find this graph. I'm going to unshare my screen for a second because I'm not sure what I'm going to go through here. If I can find it. Okay. So I had spoken to you guys earlier saying that I was running a full trial on our bee cozy. I'd done a redesign, had developed a new one that had a sort of more eco-friendly insulation. So I'd run that, I'd run a bee cozy group, and then I'd done a top insulation only group, and then I did an unwrapped group. And this is the weight loss data over the year. So now these time points at the bottom aren't necessarily equally spaced, but they're about once a month up until we started feeding here, and then it's about once a week. So you can see, I don't have the statistics here, but the only group that is statistically different is the completely unwrapped group. So the completely unwrapped was significantly lighter. Now, does that matter? Hard to say, but what does matter for sure is brood. Oh, wait, that's not brood. Okay, so this is just another version of the same graph I just showed you, only in bars. This is the brood in the spring. So when we unwrap those guys, this is around the 28th, yeah, April 28th. Quantified how much cap brood is in the colonies. Again, the only group that's statistically different is the completely unwrapped group. So yeah, definitely some good evidence for top insulation. Yeah, yeah. And to be fair, this is specifically the top insulation that we used was like the Bee Cozy top insulation. So I'm planning on actually rerunning this study this winter. actually having just a side wrap group and seeing how much difference that makes. Sadly, the Eco Cozy redesign probably will never see the light of day because it's too expensive to manufacture. So unfortunately, yeah. So yeah, well, we can look at populations too, but it actually tells the same story as the brood. So this is the spring populations based on seams of bees from the top and the bottom. These are all Langstroth. These are all singles, by the way, single overwintered Langstroths with nothing else.
Were any of these hives closed, like had closed top entrances?
No,
Were they
they all have
condensing?
Open top entrances.
Okay.
These are all open top entrances. And then the top insulation that's on there is the Bee Cozy one. So it's a piece of insulation in a plastic bag. So that covers up that top feeding hole that's in
Almost.
there. Yeah. Yeah.
Almost the full.
Almost, yes. Okay. Any other questions on that?
That is kind of all. Thank you very much. Lots of good data.
Yeah, and I'm
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you for having me.
You get a chance to look at the sign?